Today's message is going to be maybe a little different than past messages in that in the service we're going to be hopefully spending a lot of time in discussion about a topic that we touched on last week, actually, about God's vision for His church. And last week we touched on a little bit that, God gave some commands to us that it really gives us a direction of what we're supposed to do as a church. He tells us that we need to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and that we need to love our neighbor as ourselves, and that we need to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that He has commanded them. And so our discussion today is going to be, how do we do that? How do we go about loving God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength? What are some things that we can do? What are the experiences that we can have that we can love Him with our entire being? What are the things that we can do? Well, number one, who are our neighbors? And what are the things that we can do to show our love to them? And then what are some things we can do? What are some practices that we can put in place to make disciples of all nations, to baptize them and to teach them? But before we get into that discussion, there were a couple passages that came to my mind as I was thinking about this, the discussion that we're going to have. And one of the passages is found in Numbers chapter 14 or chapter 13 to the beginning of chapter 14. And it's the story of where Moses, he sends spies into the land. They're getting ready to enter into the promised land. And he sends 12 spies into the land to explore it and to see what it's all about, or what the land is like and what the people are like. And they were to go in chapter 13, verse 17, they were to go up through the Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How's the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was the season for the first ripe grapes. And so these 12 went into the land and they investigated all that was taking place and who the people were and the soil and everything. And they came back to Moses with this report. They said, "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit, but the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan." And when given the challenge, Caleb was one of the spies, and he challenges them, let's go into the land, let's capture it, let's take it for our own. And the spies replied, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there were of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. And so they were spreading this fear of, we're not going to go into this land because there's no way. The people are too strong for us. There's no way we can do this. And there were only 2 out of those 12 spies, Joshua and Caleb, who said that they could go into the land. They could go in and conquer the land because God was on their side. And God was going to fight for them. And so from that, even though it was not the popular vote, 2 out of the 12, the Israelites did move forward and take the land. The other stories in the New Testament, in John chapter 6, verses 1 to 15, and it's one of the accounts where Jesus feeds the 5,000. And in that passage, we read that there was a large crowd of people that followed Jesus pretty much wherever he went because of the signs and the miracles that he performed. And when he saw the crowds, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" And Philip replied, saying, "It would take more than a half of a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have one bite." To this, Andrew spoke up and said, "Here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Then Jesus had the people sit down, and there were 5,000 plus people, 5,000 men plus families. And he took the bread and the fish from that single meal, and he gave thanks, and he distributed it to those who were seated on the ground. And they were to eat as much as they wanted. He wanted to eat their fill. And when they were done eating, Jesus had his disciples collect what was left over following that meal. And in that story, they collected 12 baskets with the pieces of bread that were left over. You know, a couple things as we go into a time of discussion in our service. And if you're watching this, that you can respond to this. I'll give you my email address at the end. A couple things to consider from these passages as we go into discussion. Number one, it's the importance of being attentive to our surroundings. Being attentive to what's going on around us. You know, the 12 spies and the 12 disciples were given instruction that required attentiveness. They were supposed to go into the land and see what was happening. Was the land good or bad? Were the people strong or weak? Were the cities fortified or not? And they had to see what was taking place. And the disciples had to see, here was the 5,000 people. How are we going to feed them? And being attentive to who was there and what was available to them. And, what do we see happening in our own communities? And within our sphere of influence, what's taking place around us that we could help with, or we could be a part of in the community. Second thing is to know that the unpopular ideas just might be the best ideas. With the 12 spies, only 2 of them agreed. 2 of them thought that they could take the land. It was the unpopular vote. It was the unpopular decision. 10 of the 12 said, "There's no way. We will be crushed if we go into the land." But the 2 said that they could. They could do it. And even though it was the unpopular idea, it was the idea that won the day. And so the unpopular idea, don't be afraid of the unpopular idea, because God may use that for his glory. Number 3, along the same lines, the smallest idea might just be the greatest one. You look at the disciples they were there faced to feed 5,000 people. And Jesus says, "Where can we get the bread to feed these people?" Philip gave a true answer. It would take a half a year's wages to get enough bread just for people to have a single bite. But then Andrew comes along. And he says, "Hey, Jesus, here's these 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But what will that do for the 5,000? And Jesus took that small idea, the smallest idea, and he took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and he fed 5,000 people with it. But then number 4, to know that when God is involved, anything is possible. When God is involved in the situation, anything is possible. Only 2 of the 12 spies thought it was possible to take the land, and it was because of their faith in God that he was going to be on their side and they were going to be able to conquer it, and they did because of him, because of God. And with the 5 loaves of bread and the 2 fish, Jesus was able to feed the crowd that had followed him. Not only was he able to feed them, he satisfied them. They were to eat until they were satisfied. And not only did he satisfy them, he provided abundantly above what he needed, that they were able to collect 12 basketfuls at the end. So, God can take our ideas, and any idea, the good ones, the unpopular ones, and bring about the fulfillment of his purposes. There really is no bad idea, but it takes courage to share the ideas that we have. And I know that's the fear for a lot of people, to open their mouth and share what God is maybe nudging them to do, nudging you to do. Think about the courage it took Joshua and Caleb to go against the other 10, to say, we can do this, to share their thoughts. Imagine what Andrew might have thought when 5,000 people, probably closer to 10,000 people. And Jesus says, how can we feed them? Can you imagine Andrew? Hey, Jesus, here's some couple loaves of bread and a couple fish. Can you imagine the courage it took for him to even suggest that? But it was a small idea. But their ideas could have been laughable moments, kind of like with Andrew. That could have been a laughable moment. Here's one meal for one person. Jesus, can you use this to feed 5,000? But God brought about great things from those ideas. And so in our time, in our service today, and I want you to think about it too. What thoughts or ideas do you have about God's church? What can we do to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength? What are some activities that we can do? What are some actions we can put into place? What can we do to show our love of God, our entire being loving the Lord? Who are our neighbors? Who would you describe as our neighbors? And what can we do? What are some things that we can do today to show our love to them? And what might be some of the ways that we, as the church, can make disciples of Jesus? What is it that works? What are some thoughts of, maybe we try this? Or can we do this to bring people in? Or can we do this to reach out to people? And to share those ideas. The good ideas, the unpopular ones, the great ideas, or the simple ideas. And God can use those for his glory. And so we're going to discuss that in the service. But if you have an idea of what you would like to see the Church of God doing, shoot me an email. There's a couple emails you can send to. You can send it to pastor@livingwateruc.org or to clark@spiritualbodybuilding.org. And I pray about that. Think about that. How do we show, or how do we love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength? How do we love our neighbor as ourselves? And how do we make disciples of all nations? Something to think about. God bless you. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.